Okay.
Would someone text Saran just a reminder? Maybe she forgot.
I'll send her a text.
All right. We're all set. So we can get started.
Okay. Meeting of the subcommittee for the AD Gray building. We have a quorum. Freeman Zausner, Bruce Metrick, Bob Butler, Jan Minzy, and also Max Johnstone and Julie Kaiser, the town manager, are on. I'd like to, has everybody had a chance to read last session's meeting minutes? And any comment? Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I move the minutes be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any noes? Let it be noted, the meeting minutes are approved. The next discussion item, what's the next discussion item, Max? The letter.
The RFP discussion for AD Gray Field.
Okay, and so that doesn't have to go to executive session.
No, this
Okay.
is this and a description of a housing tip are the only items not in the executive session.
Okay, so kicking that off on the what I thought I would do, just took it on my own to draft up some bullet points in a term sheet frame to frame what we think or what I heard were important points that would be in an RFP. So the purpose of issuing that, and I had Max take a look at it ahead of time, and he edited it and deleted some things and added some things. It's no pride of authorship. It's just a starting point and a way to not get caught up in the boilerplate and the legalese of a formal RFP. So in that spirit, what I was hoping we could do is answer any immediate questions you might have about it but it's not really me. I tried to put in there what I thought I heard in the last meeting. So I think what's important is people address certain points. If there's something missed, something you'd like changed, something deleted, then we just do that to the framework. And then once we're satisfied that we have the critical points of a document, then we can figure out who can turn it into a formal RFP. So one more point is it's easier to I think it's easier to read something and critique it or criticize it and add to it than it is to just say, okay, let's get a whole bunch of people and draft something up. It's just a starting point. So take it with that spirit, and you can just open it up for ads, deletes, comments, and what have you.
And right now I'm just sharing my screen so people can see what the Word document is.
The last point, at least my training, was when you put something like this together, what you're trying to do is saying, these are our absolutes. This is what we absolutely need to have from our side, the town side, regardless of what a developer wants to do. So it's your going in position, and you really want to put your absolutes there and say, when we go out, you don't say these are not negotiable, but these are very, very important to us. So if something's not important, you can strike it, and it gives more flexibility. I'll just leave it at that. Anybody want to start commenting? Or
I'd like to know why Max lined out items 5 and 6 under requirements.
I felt for number 5, that was being a bit too descriptive. I figured it's already going to be in a wetland. It's already going to be in a village district. I didn't know if we were going to do single family homes or if we were going to open up to possibly apartments. And multi-unit families. And 1.5 to 2-story homes, I don't know what that was going to be for height. So I only struck out 5 because I figured the whole point of this is to see who's interested in the market. And I didn't know if we wanted to just leave that at all types of residential housing, or if we are only doing single family homes. Because I figured if there's 1 or 2 homes that are built on the soccer field, I don't know how many people are going to be supportive of that. And then for item number 6, list the potential economic benefits. I don't see what that has to do with developing a residential home. I mean, if someone says, you know, the top floor is going to be homes, but underneath is going to be some commercial, I can see some economic benefit. But if someone's going to buy the home and turn it into residential, I don't see what comparison we're going to get in economic benefits.
I was just thinking taxes, that's all.
What?
I was just thinking taxes. You know,
Taxes.
taxes.
And jobs.
I think I'll throw this out since we jumped right into item 5. I just eyeballed, even if you take away from the wetlands and take away the wetlands, and that might not all be wetlands. That's just the, you know, just a screen.
No, it's mostly near the woods anyways.
Okay, so I was guessing that when you look at the zoning ordinance on what type of homes can go in there and the lot size, you could probably get 10 to 12 homes in there with a well laid out plan and have the roads, you know, a cul-de-sac weaving around. You could probably get 10 to 12 single family homes in there. When you think about the look and the makeup of homes in that region, you know, we're not thinking suburban homes here with half acres and big yards. You're going for, you know, something more that suits the character of the village. I could be all right with that, but that's how I eyeballed it.
Do we want to mention something about the developer being responsible for installing sidewalks? So that it's residential, more residential and approachable in nature? And that it has to be wide enough for fire trucks to go down the road and that kind of thing.
Bob, I thought of all those kind of things, and then I'll just throw this out. When you go to where it says it'll be responsible to comply with all federal, state, and local permits in the planning board, I thought all of that would have been taken care of in the planning ordinance. You know, just the things. That's not me.
Not me either.
So we could be more specific about refer to the, you know, make sure you refer to the planning board zoning requirements on what has to be done for a subdivision.
Does this include the ball field, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Millbrook Ball Field, yes.
Are we sure we really want to include the ball field?
Well, you know, that's the whole discussion. You know, I didn't pick up, again, I was just trying to remember what everybody was talking about. We said, well, if you include the ball field, then the developer would have to find a suitable place for recreation.
Okay.
I did, and Max took this out perhaps for good reason, but there were some words in there where I was trying to lead a developer to say, if we didn't use the ball field and we just used the next lot down, maybe that's wrong, but with the ball field in place and a lot adjacent to the AD Gray building, if you zoom out on the Max maps and then look at Google Earth, there's a lot of landlocked or semi-landlocked property in that area that you could access by Glidden Street, whatever it is, that street that goes up there. I guess it's Glidden. And, you know, it goes alongside AD Gray and past the ball field. And
Millbrook Lane.
So I thought, well, maybe this could be, you know, an opener for somebody to come in and say, well, I could do that and approach the private landowners with the land that's around there. Because there's, when you start looking at the shapes of the lots and where the existing frontage is up Main Street, mostly up Main Street, some of them are completely landlocked. And so this could potentially open them up if somebody had access along that street and that parcel that the town owns. But Max, why did you take that out?
I took that out because the RFP was about the AD Gray and Philbrook ball field. So
Yeah.
I wanted this to be more narrowed and focused on these two items. We can certainly add something in later on saying, because I think I was looking at another RFP on that, but the focus should be on the fields if this is what we're doing, and we can put an item in saying there are abutting properties, we can talk with neighbors, but the big focus should be on the fields. I think the reason I wanted to do that is because, well, the whole reason we're even starting to do this RFP is because the first developer who wanted to turn AD Gray into something, he wanted to take the AD Gray and Philbrook ball field in addition to the AD Gray school, and wanted to also get
Right.
multiple other lots. And then you had Volunteers of America show up and say, well, we just need the AD Gray lot and that's it.
Right.
And that's what I think I wanted. I don't want us to go down that path again of saying it's
Yeah.
everything that's available. And if we're talking about an RFP, and we can guarantee these two pieces of property, we can't guarantee nearby abutting property owners.
Right.
So that's the other reason I wanted to do that, because we can only give these two lots. So that's what we should only focus on.
Bob?
I'm just wondering, is the only access to the lots that don't have frontage on a road through the AD Gray property and the ball field?
That's what, saw a few of those that way, yeah.
If we,
What?
it's a tricky question. I think we do need to say something about the developer allowing for access to those landlocked parcels.
I'm not saying that it's that's why I'm saying we can have that in there.
Yeah, that's, I guess
But
I'm suggesting that, Max.
Yeah, so we can leave a little tidbit in there that says if a developer wants to go beyond and ask private property owners, they may, but the focus should be on the two lots that we can guarantee.
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't make suggestions about what they could or couldn't do with the properties that don't have access. I'd simply put a simple statement in there saying that, noting that we would prefer proposals that permit access to
The
the
landlocked properties.
landlocked properties and let them draw their own conclusions from that.
I think that's a good idea.
Does anybody else have trepidation about taking away the ball field? Because I have a lot of trepidation about that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, Jan, we haven't heard from Jan. I was gonna ask Jan to comment on what's here, and then I was gonna put out my opinion, if you will, on what I wrote, because this was a collective of what I thought I heard. So Jan, any comments?
Yes, I think the ball field, in my experience here, has been an integral part of our recreation program for all children, all ages. And I really don't feel that I wouldn't want to sell it. And I don't think that that's part of our job to do that. I think our job is simply to address any, well, if I can read what we said, to consider new proposals for use of the school property. And that's not school property. So I don't think we should be dealing with it at all, personally. And we did have one person, one recreation person here last time, and I think we need to hear,
Troy Smith.
If people want to consider, I think we need to hear from more of the recreation department. But I'm not sure that anybody on this committee has had any real experience with that field. as far as the community field?
Bob?
Yeah, I think we're backtracking here a little bit. My takeaway from the last meeting was that as a precondition to developing the ball fields and any related property was that the developer construct a replacement ball field prior to even beginning to develop the area where the ball fields now exist. That was one point. And I thought I heard Ben Vale say that made sense. The other point is that we need to increase our tax base. Having prime property devoted to a ball field which is potentially buildable and where there is a potential substitute for that property isn't an efficient use of town property.
I agree, Bob, but I don't believe that's our job. I think that belongs in the planning department. I don't disagree that we ought to develop some of our lands. What I'm saying is it's not part of our scope. And whether Tim Wells, we were looking at his contract only, that doesn't carry over to other prospects.
Well, let me throw out my opinion, soak it on this. And while I agree with all the points, just from, I'll say in my experience, it's a big change. Even if we got it replaced and got that through, it's a big change on the town, and people don't like big changes. So that ball field and soccer field's been there forever. I think that's a huge amount of energy it's going to take to convince people to go ahead with that. I just think it's going to get wrapped up in a lot of debate and consternation. And I think there's easier places where, and so let's follow I think, yeah, you could do it. We might be successful. I think it'll stir up ill will. That's just my opinion from things that happen in other places. So
My concern is that we have a recreation committee, one member attended and that got back to the other ones. And I just think that putting an RFP out, and I think we really need to, maybe your committee and the recreation committee need to sit down and have a conversation.
right. So let me just continue the thread. When I started to develop this and I backed off and looked at property in town.
By the way, Ben Vale is now attending the meeting. Hi, Ben.
Okay.
Good.
And looked at other open acreage around town that a developer might want to approach private individuals. If we decided that the ball field was off limits, or it was just going to be too big a push, we didn't want to die on that hill, then it doesn't make any sense to me to try to develop the other field. It's just not big enough to sustain the infrastructure that you need. But I'm very encouraged by, again, when you zoom out and you look at the open parcels that are right in town, right? They're not out of town, they're right in town, they're in the village or adjacent to the village. That if there was a way to encourage a developer to come in and look at that on their own and just do it privately, and we could stay completely out of it. That just hit me, that we know what we want to do, but you're chasing, it just might be too hard and take a lot of time, whereas there's a quicker solution. I think if we could, I'm going to use my term, somehow the town advertises or seeks out property owners that want to have their property developed, and we encourage that. Because it's a very narrow project. Even if everybody said, yeah, let's develop that, and we went along with it, like I said, you're going to get 10 houses max in there, and it's going to, a lot of tearing up the roads and this and that and flying around, and you'll still have probably 50% of the people that for one reason or another don't ever want to do it. So, but if it's a private enterprise, and maybe the compromise is there's just we give a leasehold or we give access because that's a public road for the developer to use that's in front of the fields to access those parcels or other parcels around town that are open. I think it's just an easier push and we could stay out of it. So I'm kind of agreeing, I hear Julie, I hear Dan. It's what are we trying to solve? And I'm not getting into what's our charter or anything because, I know certain things were approved at the planning board and I wasn't there, so I can't attest to that. But so I'll shut up now.
What's another, just to add something here, I was looking at the map that Bruce and Matt sent. The property between AD Gray and the ball field includes the parking lot for the ball field.
Correct.
So if you did do something with that middle piece of property, that would be a problem to the recreation department in the ball field because there would not be parking, only along the road parking, and that parking lot is often full both sides.
I think that's why the two were sort of a bundled deal. You can't really develop one without the other one being consideration.
Yeah, exactly.
You're muted, Bruce.
Anybody else want to weigh in? So I have a suggestion just to think about, and that's that a topic you can't get away from is, boy, somebody should do something with the AD Gray building. How many people have heard that? How many times? So let's look at what success would be if we focus just on that and get that across the goal line. That's a big success that hasn't been accomplished in the last 10 years. And I think we should focus. I'd like to focus our energy on that. I would also like, as a parallel, make a recommendation to I guess the select board that they explore ways to get developers in town to look at developing residential properties, because all you're hearing is the housing market is hot. It's 26% on the upswing. Towns like Waldoboro, we're getting squeezed from both ends because we're more affordable than adjoining towns. But that's a bigger challenge, a much bigger challenge than the narrow focus we started out with on AD Gray. And if we get diluted, my fear is we'll be here 2-3 years from now still trying to figure out how to get the AD Gray building used and up to speed and whatever. And because everybody's on, I got so much energy. So I'd like to just focus our energy on that.
I agree.
I agree.
I have no problem with that.
Not drop the other thing, but hand it off to Max, because Max has plenty of time.
What?
That was a joke, Max.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is what we were talking about last time, that at least with this committee, focus should be on AD Gray, and this RFP could be brought up once in a while, but unless there's a real big push, I can certainly do it in my spare time, but it'll be out there, and we'll see if there's interest. But I mean, if we can see if there's any interest in developing the area, but this committee should probably focus more on the school itself.
But what about the idea of making a recommendation to the select board that they the economic development, whatever the economic, maybe you turn it over to the economic development committee if that's still a committee, and say,
Yeah.
let's attract some developers for single family homes, or just leave it at residential. Because we do need the tax revenue to come in.
I mean, you can certainly recommend that the BDC take a look at it if that's what you want to do, or recommend that I do it. You can do whatever you want for an ad hoc committee. Just make whatever recommendation you'd like. I know that I'm giving a very broad term, but really you can make your recommendation to whoever you would like.
I'm not going to say anymore. I want other people to weigh in.
Can people hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm tardy to the meeting. I agree 100% with the sentiments just expressed, and I think that without a established place for replacement fields, the comments about the need for this space and the parking that goes with it are critical. Since I sit right behind the field and I see the crowds that come, well, did come before this with youth football and youth soccer. I think it's has to stay as it is until you have a clearly defined replacement space.
Does anyone else have any thoughts?
I think didn't we hear from everyone but Freeman?
Nothing to say.
Oh, okay.
Well, how do we make a motion to ask the town, the select board to an ad hoc motion to take this on for look at getting developers in to look at parcels in town for developing single family homes, residential homes, single family homes.
Is that a motion, Bruce?
I don't know the logistics of how you do that, so I need Julie or Max. It's a really important issue. I just think it's going to be a big uphill battle to try to get community support for using those two parcels. And I think it can get away from us pretty quickly, and we'll get diverted on the AD Gray, which would be a huge success if 2-3 years from now we're looking back and it's done.
I think, and this was something I was going to bring up, I think we have to look at all of our property that we have in our possession and figure out a way what we can live with and what we can't live without and market it. I think you're going to have in probably in a couple of years, you're going to have Friendship Street School that's available, which would, probably be more conducive to maybe higher end homes because it does have the river view. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot to this. I do think it's beyond the scope of AD Gray. I agree with that. But I do think it's an important subject. We have to find a home for where it should live. Because I do think we have some property that we could profit from in some way and enhance our tax base properly. And I think that lives probably in the planning department, but and I hate to say this, but it might be a different committee or, members from, and not so much a different committee, but members from something like the Recreation Committee, the AD Gray Committee, the EDC. But I think it's a part and parcel of a much larger discussion that we need to have. Because I think you're right, and I don't remember who said this, but people looking for homes in Maine. And we are the last affordable waterfront in Mid-Coast.
Well, is it against town policy to try to facilitate local property owners with prospective developers? Because that, let the private sector jump in and away you go. I think
we're starting to see that to some extent. you know, Abden Simmons has said always, you know, there is a lot of property that's developable, but people don't want to give that up. You know, it's been handed down, or they're large landowners and they don't want to part with that. The pushback you're going to get from that is it definitely will change the culture and the feel of the town, and that's going to open up a whole nother debate. But I think you're seeing that now. I mean, I think Max can support this, but we are getting more inquiries. There are, just today, I talked to one person who's been here a long time, who has a large parcel, and they're seeing, you know, and hearing that properties are selling 20% over what the asking prices are. So, I mean, maybe that is something that's going to spur something. But I do think that the town has some unique properties that it should probably look at. But like I said, I do think AD Gray Committee, I think we've got a lot on our plate with AD Gray, and I was going to bring this up after we had this discussion, but I had Tim Wells asked to meet with me yesterday. So, you know, he has ideas again, and wants a second bite at the apple. So, I mean, there is obviously interest in market value housing that has spurred more interest from him too.
So I think what I'm hearing from all this is, if there's a motion or a recommendation being made, it's that the select board designate a committee, whether that's the EDC or just designates me to do something, to evaluate all town-owned parcels and try and find another use for them, to try and help alleviate the tax base, if that's what I'm hearing. You all don't have to jump in at once on that.
That sounds reasonable, Max.
If that's a motion, I would make it, Max.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Correct.
Passed. So I know that was painful because, you know, I wrote this whole thing up, and but as I was thinking about it, I felt I had to point those things out on. The big issue was, let's get AD Gray done, but not lose sight of the fact that we need to bring more homes into town. So what's next on the agenda, Max?
Next on the agenda is under new business, a housing TIF. So this is something that I wanted to talk about because that was a possible financing option. I know that was talked about very early on in the in these AD Gray discussions, even before volunteers showed up. And recently, there was an article in the Portland Press Herald speaking of millions of dollars in TIF revenue going towards affordable housing units. So I thought it would be beneficial as possibly a little refresher or crash course to some members of this committee who may be interested in knowing what a TIF is, just in case this does come up a lot more, and we may need to consider a housing TIF, especially if we're talking about affordable housing, whether it's for Volunteers of America or for other potential projects in town. But is that something, that was something I wanted to see, first of all, if anyone wanted to talk about that. So does the committee want to talk about this? I'm not hearing anything.
You want to send some people to TIF school? Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much. I can quickly go over some numbers just for what it is and what we would expect if we were to place something like AD Gray into a housing TIF.
I think it would be great if you went over it.
Okay. Just quickly writing down a note. So a TIF, a tax increment financing district, the long story short, it captures and shelters new value of a property so that we can apply that money to other projects in town. There is an economic TIF already in Waldoboro, and we have 2% of all parcels where if any development is made on site, then that new captured value goes towards economic projects. Now, the original value continues to go into the general fund, but that new value, that new captured value, it keeps the money here in Waldoboro. So for example, if there was a building that was valued at, let's say, $100,000, whatever the mill rate is, that $100,000 valuation will continue to go to the general budget. But once it gets new value after the TIF is made, let's say it becomes $150,000, that $50,000 valuation goes towards economic or housing projects in Waldoboro. And what's a benefit for a TIF is that there are 3 different sort of county and state taxes that are always considered: the county tax, the revenue sharing, and the education sharing. So what a TIF does is when the new value is made, that new value does not count against us when we have to consider county, state, and education taxes. So it pretty much says that our value hasn't been going up. So we can continue getting education subsidies and we can continue having a lower state and county tax rate. This is primarily beneficial for towns that are going to experience a great big development, but only in 1 or 2 spots. And so they want to put it in a TIF so that the entire town is not seen as this multi-millionaire location, but instead the rest of the town has a chance to grow alongside of it without being penalized. Have I lost anyone so far? Because if not, I'll continue.
Thank you, Max. That was great. Keep up the good work.
Well, so that's just the basic summary. For a housing TIF, so there are 3 different categories for TIFs. There's economic, housing, and public transportation. We already have an economic one. We would create a housing one specifically for AD Gray, and we're not going to do a public transportation one. So what would happen is we create it, and it would have to be approved by the voters. Once we sell AD Gray over to Volunteers of America, all the new captured value that they would have, that would go towards this TIF district. And in a TIF district, we always lay out what the money will go towards. Usually we can be very broad about it. We can just say it goes towards projects that'll have low middle income housing. We can say it will go towards public infrastructure to support more affordable housing. We can be very broad on the topic. But I believe what would likely happen, and this is the case that happens in, say, Portland or Lewiston, is we would do a credit enhancement agreement, which is us saying we will get the funds from this area, but then a certain amount will go back to the developer so that they can continue to operate without being in the red, if that makes sense. And for AD Gray, I had Daryl do very rough and dirty numbers. and he estimated that if AD Gray was to be developed based on Volunteers of America's schematics, and this is just what they showed us, obviously can change, and certain other factors could happen later on, but the value of the property could likely be $3.4 million. This is a rough number, so please don't think that's a permanent in stone number. That's just what Daryl projected based on what we were given back from back in June. But 3.4, that would be the new value of the property. And then at the mill rates of 0.182, that would be $63,172 in taxes. But with the TIF, a certain percentage of that would go back to Volunteers of America to continue their operating costs and maintenance costs. And we can have it for a certain period of time, like the first 5 years, a certain percentage will go back to them, and then years after that, the percentage goes down, so we continue to get more money back. And we can also have it made so the amount that we get from this TIF goes back into the general fund as well. There's a lot more, but I don't want to overwhelm too many people, especially when I don't have papers right in front of me that I can show you. Had I had the visual thing, I would have had a lot easier time describing it. But talking over the phone doesn't really help demonstrate it doesn't really help convey my point, I think. But that's
Thank
the
you,
very
Max.
that's the very rough idea of it.
Bob?
Max, isn't AD Gray already included in the economic development TIF?
Yes, AD Gray is in the economic development TIF, which means if anything is developed on site, then the money would go towards economic development projects instead. So, utility expansions or what else, like
That's not,
sidewalks or redoing the Dutch Neck or Pine Street landings. Yeah,
that's not the point of my question.
yeah,
The point of the question is that you have to go back to the voters to effect a legislative change in the definition of the TIF that covers that property.
correct. We would have to do
Wanted to make-
2 votes at the same time. One vote would be taking AD Gray outside of the economic TIF, and a second vote putting AD Gray into the housing TIF.
Okay.
And Max, why? Okay. What's the purpose of that if Volunteers is already finding all their own funding?
Well, the first is so we can shelter the money. As I mentioned earlier, there are county taxes, state taxes, and education subsidies that will be affected if AD Gray is not within a TIF district.
But I thought it was in the economic development TIF.
It is in the economic development TIF. But what I'm saying is one option we can think about and we can consider is having it in a housing TIF so that
Housing doesn't work for the economic development TIF?
correct. The economic development TIF means that if we have any development in one of those parcels, AD Gray being one of them, then the new value from it has to go towards economic projects and economic projects only. So, as I say, utility expansions, fixing up the waterfronts,
I think broadband's included in that too, isn't it?
broadband is included. There's a very wide range of topics, but we have to demonstrate that it's going to help the town of Waldoboro economically. Whereas with a housing TIF, what that does is the projects are more focused towards affordable housing.
So it would
Or-
subsidize the Volunteers of America project.
Potentially, yes.
You're
Whereas
right.
the EDA would not.
I'm sorry, EDA?
Whereas economic development tip would not do that.
Yeah. And do
Correct.
we need to do that? Do we
Well-
need to subsidize it more, or, because I thought
Well,
they're pro.
Well, hold on. So for the economic TIF, at most, what that can be used for is having a utility run by it. So if we wanted to expand the sewer and water down Philbrook Lane, that could use it, but only if we believe there's going to be some economic development down there. But that's very limited to what an economic TIF can use for housing. And as for Bruce, I think that was your question on subsidizing. That's something I think we need to talk more with Volunteers of America about, and in executive session to find out more about financing, just as we're going on with their letter of interest. But what I'm saying is, I don't know what their specific financing is. I know they're doing grants, but I don't know if they want this as well. And that's what maybe they're going to be doing some market research, and maybe they're going to find something later on where they realize there's a certain amount we'll also need, and we need to find a place to do it. So that's why I'm saying it would be beneficial to have this, just whether it's Volunteers of America or maybe another developer, because we're now talking about other pieces of property in Waldeboro to develop. So
what do we have to do to, Julie and Max, what do we have to do to get this moving? Because I know you have to go through a lot of hoops before you even take it to a vote.
I pretty much just have to write something up and get it approved by DEC, by the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, and then I would need the town to have a vote on it, but we'd have to have a public hearing session. I also need to make sure that people are fine with it. So
does the select board have to approve that to happen, or you just do that as part of your normal duties? Because what I'm getting at is, do we need to make any kind of motion to start that, or is that out of our realm?
No, you don't have to do any motion. This is just me saying what it is. And because we were talking about RFP for the ball fields, we were talking about what to do with AD Gray, with Volunteers of America. So I didn't know if this was a topic that we were going to be dealing with or not. But I felt it was beneficial that everyone here is aware of what this program is about.
So what I'm hearing is this is an FYI for this committee, and we don't have to take any action. And I know I'm being official about this. And it sounds like Max is going to move forward with it under Julie's guidance, and then it will go through the normal town process.
Yes.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
I think the devil is in the details. I'd like to see what Max is actually proposing.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
certainly there's an incentive there for a developer involved with AD Gray to have another source of funding to help the project.
Any more comments on that topic, Ben or Jan or Freeman?
Nope,
I'm good.
me
Great.
too.
Okay, moving along, what's next, Max?
Next is executive session.
So
So you would just need to vote to go into executive session.
I move we adjourn into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056C.
So moved.
moved and seconded, any comments? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? So moved. Max, take us into executive session.